Verse 183. Now I'm going to go through each phrase to explain using a more precise translation. What you see here is a very traditional translation. The translation was originally done by a very highly knowledgeable monk from many years ago, maybe 60 years ago, 80 years ago. Yeah, more than 80 years ago, and his name was Narada. Right? In fact, he was the first teacher of my teacher, Venerable Punnaji. When my teacher, Venerable Punnaji, at the age of 6, he was already aware that he wanted one day to become a monk. And because he came from a wealthy family, his parents refused to allow him to become a monk because he was the only son. And his family was wealthy, so they wanted the son to inherit everything, did not allow him to be a monk. But he was very inspired by this Reverend Narada who translated it. So the translation is quite old-fashioned, not very precise in modern language. So I've put in bracket the black words which are more precise. So the first phrase here to say, not to do any evil. The not to do, actually, the real meaning was to refrain, right? It is not like forcing, right? There is no force, there is no rejection. It's just refraining, abandoning, giving up, avoiding, right? That's why it is called avoid evil. It's not really forcing to fight against evil. It's really not to do means refraining, abandoning. Any evil. Here it's referring to all forms of unwholesome ways, meaning all forms of things which are unwholesome. And when we say something is unwholesome, it usually means that there is bad intentions or the action is hurting or harming yourself or other people. So that's why it's called unwholesome. So not to do any evil is referring to refraining, abandoning, any evil intentions of any sort, unwholesome intentions, right? And the second phrase, to cultivate good. To cultivate. The word cultivate is meaningful. But here, cultivate means also you do it yourself, help yourself, self-help. Therefore, it's really self-actualized, realizing through reason from within, understanding. And not only, you see, cultivate is not just an intellectual exercise. Oh, you know it, that's good enough. That is not it. It includes living it out. That's why a more accurate understanding of the word cultivate is self-actualize and then living it out. What good is knowing if you don't practice? Because that knowledge does not transform your life. It's the practice that transforms your life. Knowledge will never transform your life. Knowledge will never produce an outcome. It is practice that produces an outcome. You may know a particular, let's say you may know how to cook something very well, but if you keep that in your mind and not do it, even you have the best recipe of cooking adobo and you have it in your mind but you never cook it, what good is having that recipe? Right? So it's just a piece of paper. So knowledge is nothing but just something in your memory if you don't practice it. So this is really talking about self-actualize, means bringing from within, doing it and living it out. And good. Good means all forms of wholesomeness. So here, wholesomeness means something that helps yourself and help others to have a better life. So that's really what it is. To cultivate good means self-actualize, living it, all forms of wholesomeness. And the third part, to purify one's mind. And the word purify here is not just cleansing alone, but also maintaining it. You know, it's like a house. If you want to sweep the dirt in your house, after you have finished sweeping the dirt in your house, right, you maybe take an hour or half hour, and then after that you don't do it anymore, the house will get dirty again, right? You need to keep doing it. You keep to maintaining it. So the same with your mind. When you practice and purify your mind, you can't just do it one time and say, now I have purified my mind, I don't have to do anymore. Complacent. And then the mind begins to get contaminated again. You need to maintain that purification. So it's really about continuously maintaining, not only just purifying. So it is really the discipline to maintain. It's just like a discipline to maintain your house. After cleaning your house, you got to keep doing a regular cleaning. So this is purifying one's mind. And this is the teaching of the Buddhas. Here, the word teaching is a very simple word. You thought that, it's just what somebody taught. Actually, it's more than just teaching. It's more than just a lesson. It's actually what is known as a educational domain. And the Pali word for it is called sasana, which is the last word up there in the Pali at the top. Sasana. So it is put there as sasanang. But it means an educational domain, meaning a community of people who learn it and practice it. So it's not just somebody teaching something, but it is helping a community of people to learn it and practice it. And that is the Buddha Sasana. The Buddha Sasana is referring to that community of people who study what the Buddha taught and practice what the Buddha taught. And that whole community is practicing the Buddha Dhamma. So that is really called sasanang or sasana. So therefore, this is the teaching of the Buddhas. It is in plural, all the Buddhas. So when we look at the first part, it is really to abandon evil ways. And here it's very important. The evil ways is really referring to 3 poisons. The Buddha described that our mind is polluted by 3 poisons. I'll come to the 3 poisons later. Briefly, it is greed, hatred, and delusion. Greed means wanting things, wanting to acquire things. Hatred means getting rid of things, pushing it away, don't want it. And thirdly, delusion means whatever we have or don't have, we begin to have unwholesome thoughts about it, thoughts which are not helpful to us. So that's delusion, the mind. So therefore, those are called the 3 poisons. We'll come to that in a moment. So here, the Buddha was warning us not to partake or engage in these 3 poisons. And the next part is really not only just learning and practicing it, but living it out, to live a good life. And the ultimate of living a good life begins with renunciation, renouncing worldly pleasures. That's why a monk in Theravada tradition live very simply. They only have the robes with them and the necessary toiletries to help themselves, shave the head, wash their face, and a bowl for them to put the food. So, living the good life. And finally, the last part, to purify one's mind, is really self-actualize. This is self-realization through reason and disciplined practice of maintaining. Right? So this is really what the Buddhas were teaching. Now I will show you a translation, a modern translation done by my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punnaji, where he made it very clear. Instead of just avoid evil, do good. You see, avoid evil, that itself is not very accurate practice. The reason why is this. Our mind is constantly imbued with these 3 poisons. Our mind is already polluted with greed, anger, hatred, delusions. Right? So when they arise and disturb us, we can't avoid it arising. You can't avoid it. If somebody says something terrible to you, make you angry, you can't avoid feeling the anger. But what you can do is when the anger arises, you can learn to let it go. Realizing that anger is arising, take a deep breath, pause, take a deep breath, and just relax. And then you don't feel angry anymore. If you take a deep breath and relax, your anger will subside. And that is not avoiding, that is abandoning. So abandon all evil ways. When it arises, let it go. Relinquish it, abandon it, give it up. Because it arises from within. Nobody give you anger. No. What they do is they give you pressure. They give you perceptions. It is in your mind, your interpretation of what he said that make you angry. If somebody says to me, Billy, you are so fat, I get angry because I'm thinking, oh, you're calling me fat because you think I look very ugly. Huh? And then I get angry. You see, anger arises from within. That person did not put anger in my head. That person just said something, anger came from inside. And that is one of the three poisons. Okay, abandon evil ways simply means ultimately you will not be harming yourself. You will not be harming others. That's what abandon evil ways means. And of course, it's the same as avoiding evil. But the real meaning, the real understanding is abandoning the evil ways. Okay? So, that is the first part, commonly called avoid evil. But the better and deeper meaning, avoid evil is correct, nothing wrong with that. But the more precise meaning is abandon evil ways. The second one, do good. Now, doing good is just an effort. And you can say, oh, I do good from time to time. But that's not what the Buddha was teaching. The Buddha was teaching that doing good is not just an act, not just an effort. Doing good is living your life. So the correct, more precise explanation of do good here in the context of what is taught, enter the good life, meaning you partake into a lifestyle which is only filled with good. And one of the things eventually you have to do, if you really want to practice this to the ultimate, is to renounce worldly pleasures and become a monk or a nun. If you really want to practice this to the highest level of perfection, you cannot continue to live in this worldly life of pleasures, enjoying all the pleasurable things in life. Right? That is not perfect. It is good, but not perfect. To perfect that practice, you will have to become a monk or a nun. So even for myself, I've been reminding myself, if one day I ever want to perfect the practice, I will have to be a monk, no doubt. Right? And if I were to be born as a woman, I will be a nun. Of course, in this life, it will be a monk. Okay, so enter the good life simply means cultivating wellness, peace, harmony, and happiness of all beings. That means it's not just for yourself, but it's also for others. So enter the good life. And then, of course, the third one, to purify one's mind has a purpose. Purifying the mind finally leads you to awakening. So that's awakening of the human's boundless potentials. So this is the first verse.